Have you ever wanted two completely opposite things at the same time? Part of you wants to move forward. It's calling you. You can feel it. It's less certain than where you've been, but feels more aligned, more true. And something about it keeps pulling your attention even when you're not looking for it. And another part of you wants to stay exactly where you are. You've built something there. The relationships, the competence, the version of you that knows how to operate in this season. And that version has proof behind it. People depend on it. You've earned it. And there's something about leaving it that feels more than just a transition. So you stay in the tension. And after a while, if you're honest with yourself, you start to wonder why you feel tension. As leaders, we're supposed to know what to do with tension. We move, we decide, we create momentum when there isn't any, and remove friction where it exists. That's what got us here. So when we can't seem to do that for ourselves, when the tension just sits there, being pulled in directions, that's when most of us reach for the only word that seems to fit. Stuck. I'm Steve Muscato, and this is Crafted Clarity, where we distill the tension between what we built and what we're built for. And if that word stuck has shown up for you recently, if you feel pulled in two directions and you're not sure what to do with it, join me. Because I think that there's a better description for what you're actually experiencing. And I think that description will change everything. If you spend any time with Crafted Clarity, you've heard me talk about seasons. We're always coming into one, going deeper into one, or coming out of one. Seasons have been a part of this conversation since the very beginning, and for good reason. They're one of the most honest descriptions I've found for understanding what leaders actually move through. But this episode isn't really about seasons. It's about what happens between them. Because there's a part of the seasons conversation we never named explicitly. And I think it's the part that matters most for where a lot of us are right now. It isn't the season itself. It's the overlap. And the distillation process of whiskey has a way of illuminating things that we're experiencing. Before I get into that, let me say that seasons are real, and they're an important part of life and leadership. They start, they end, and we don't always choose them, and rarely are we able to choose how long they last. Some seasons begin because we made a decision, took on a new role, a new direction, a deliberate step towards something we could see coming. Others arrive without asking our permission. A position that gets eliminated, a health event that changes everything, a loss that splits time into before and after, a market shift that makes the previous season irrelevant almost overnight. No matter how they begin, every season eventually changes. But just because the season changed doesn't mean that we did. A retirement can happen in a day. The transition can take years. You wake up on day one of the new season still carrying the weight of the one that just ended. The calendar changed, but the habits didn't, and the identity didn't. A company can get sold with a signature. Everyone sees the transaction. The founder is still trying to understand who they are without the thing they spent years building. Or a new strategy gets announced. The organization moves forward on paper, but the culture is still operating out of the previous season because culture doesn't update with a slide deck. That gap between when the season changes externally and when we actually catch up internally, well, that's the overlap. And in the overlap, most of us reach for the same word: stuck. And I think stuck is the right word. But I want to talk about that before we go further. It fits the experience in a way that many other words don't. Something needs to shift, but we can't quite move it. The future isn't clear enough to confidently step into it, and the present doesn't fit the way it used to. So we start looking for help. Books, podcasts, a trusted peer who's been through something similar, or even a coach. We look at frameworks designed to identify what's blocking us and to help us remove it. New habits to build. Accountability to create movement where there isn't any. And most of those resources are genuinely valuable. The coaches asking those questions are often asking the right ones. Frameworks can work, and new habits can help. But those tools and resources tend to work best when the foundation beneath them is ready for them. When we have some clarity about what we're carrying, what belongs in the next season, and what needs to stay in the last one. So the question underneath stuck isn't always, what do I need to do to start moving again? Sometimes it's, what am I actually carrying? And does it belong where I'm going? I think that's what many of us who feel stuck are actually experiencing. So picture the last time you saw a tug of war. The rope doesn't stop moving because nothing is happening. It stops moving because there are forces pulling in opposite directions with equal strength. Nothing is moving because both sides are pulling just as hard as the other. That kind of stuck isn't an absence of movement. It's the presence of equal and opposite force. Two seasons, two poles, both real and both strong. And that's a different problem than the one most frameworks are designed to solve. So let's talk about what the previous season is actually pulling us back to. Familiarity, competence, the version of us that has been proven and recognized and rewarded. The relationships that know us by that season. A definition of success that has years of evidence behind it. The previous season gave us something real. Confidence, credibility, certainty. It gave us a deep comfort of knowing exactly how to operate, of being in the groove of a season that worked. And that pull isn't irrational. The previous season earned its grip. In fact, if the previous season hadn't been meaningful, there probably wouldn't be as much tension at all. But here's where it can get complicated. When the overlap between seasons lasts longer than expected, when the tension doesn't resolve on the schedule we assumed, questions start surfacing underneath the pull. Was I really as effective as I thought? Did I actually know what I was doing, or did I just know how to operate in that particular season? Was that proof of something true about me, or was it only true about the season? Those are uncomfortable questions, and they tend to surface the longer we are in that overlap. Now, the emerging season, on the other hand, is pulling us differently. It rarely has the same certainty or clarity, and it doesn't have the same proof. It can't point to years of evidence of the way the previous season can. But the season ahead feels more aligned, more purposeful, more connected to what matters most at this point in the journey. For many of the leaders I talk to, and honestly for me in the seasons of my own, the emerging season isn't just the next chapter of the same story. It can actually feel more like an invitation towards something more significant than what's been built before. Towards something that can feel more like purpose. Which is exactly why the tension is so real. When two seasons are pulling at the same time, with that kind of weight on both sides, movement in either direction feels like we're losing something. But staying feels impossible. So that tug of war holds. And I'll be honest about where I am. I spent more than a decade building iBrand, helping leaders and organizations find clarity around strategy, growth, leadership, and impact. That work still matters deeply to me. I still love it. I still enjoy sitting with leaders, helping them untangle complex challenges and helping organizations align around what they're actually built for. What's interesting is that many of those conversations have changed over the years. Conversations that started as strategy conversations became leadership conversations. Leadership conversations became purpose conversations. And purpose conversations eventually became conversations about what comes next. At the same time, something else has been happening. What started as a podcast has slowly become something more. Crafted Clarity has opened doors into conversations I never expected to have. Leaders have reached out. Other podcasters have reached out. People I've never met before have invited me into conversations that have very little to do with marketing and everything to do with purpose, alignment, identity, significance, and the questions underneath the questions. The tension for me isn't between good and bad. It's between two things that both matter. Both are creating impact. Both are serving people, and both feel meaningful. And yet there are only so many hours in a day. Only so much attention. Only so much energy. Some days I still find myself wanting to spend time in the season I already know how to win. The season where I know the rules. The season where I know how success is measured. And yet at the same time, I can feel another season pulling. Not because I fully understand where it's leading, because I don't. Not because I have certainty about what comes next. I don't have that either. But because I can't ignore the signal. I can't ignore the conversations. I can't ignore the pull. So the question underneath all of that becomes, what does it look like to steward both seasons well? And if they continue pulling in different directions, should I stay where I've already proven myself? Or follow the stronger pull into whatever the next season is trying to reveal? That's not a question I have fully answered. But that's the overlap. And I'm in it. I share that because I don't think I'm unique. I think many leaders are carrying some version of the same tension. Two seasons, two legitimate pulls, and no clear framework for understanding what to do with either one. But here's something I've noticed about that overlap. It reveals things that previous seasons didn't have the right conditions to surface. In a recent episode, we sat with what attaches itself to us over time. The roles that become identity. The adaptations that started as survival in one season and stayed long past the season that required them. The ways of leading and measuring success that formed gradually through pressure, through reward, through years of being needed in a specific way. Things we never consciously chose, but that attached themselves to us. If that episode landed somewhere for you, this is the next conversation. As one season begins to loosen its grip and another begins to emerge, the things that have attached themselves start rising to the surface. Assumptions about what success is supposed to look like. Definitions of value that formed in a previous season that haven't been examined since. Ways of measuring progress that made sense then, but feel hollow now. Some of what surfaces belongs in the next season, but some of it doesn't. And others have simply never been examined at all. Most seasons give us real things: wisdom, experience, perspective, confidence. The question isn't whether those things are valuable. The question is whether we're carrying anything else along with them that shouldn't be brought into the next season. The overlap is where that question finally has room to be asked. And this is where the whiskey distillation process becomes useful to us. The distiller knows something about overlap that most of us are only now naming. When a distiller runs a batch of spirit through the still, what comes out isn't refined or uniform. The first output of the run is too strong. It's harsh, and it's not what you want in your whiskey. The last part of the run is too thin. It's weak. It has little character. But somewhere in between is what belongs in the whiskey. The distiller's job is to pay attention closely enough to know when that middle section has arrived and when it starts to fade. And it's worth noting that every batch is different. Sometimes that middle section comes through quicker, and other times it takes longer than expected. The distiller doesn't have an alarm. There's no line on a gauge to watch. Just the distiller reading what's coming through, watching the shift, noticing the change, and making a judgment call inside the overlap between what belongs and what doesn't. The cut always happens in the in-between. That's not a flaw in the process. That's exactly how the process works. The distiller doesn't force an outcome. The distiller just pays attention to what belongs moving forward and what needs to stay behind in the last season. That's the work of distillation in whiskey, revealing and separating. And I believe that that's the work of the overlap as well. Not to force movement, not to simply get unstuck, but to pay attention, to notice what's surfacing, to do the slow, honest work of discernment of what belongs in the next season and what needs to remain in the last one. And here's where I think most frameworks for getting unstuck tend to miss. Discernment requires distillation. New habits and accountability have their place, but they work on top of the foundation, not instead of it. The distiller who rushes the middle cut doesn't get a better spirit faster. They get a spirit that is bringing more than it was supposed to into the whiskey, which ends up in the new season. Movement alone doesn't guarantee transition. We can change positions, launch something new, Make a decisive external shift and carry the previous season right along with us. The old attachments, the old definitions of success, the old identity confirming itself in a new environment. That's not transition. That's movement with the previous season still attached. And this doesn't just happen to leaders. Organizations move through seasons too. And the overlap happens there as well. Previous strategies that still feel familiar. Teams that thrived in the previous season that find themselves struggling in the new one. Priorities and metrics of the last season still being applied to the work of the next one. Organizations who navigate this well usually focus on alignment with their mission, their purpose, and to what they're actually built for. They ask what belongs in the next season and what needs to stay behind, which creates an interesting mirror for us. If that's what we ask organizations to do when seasons change, what should leaders be asking of themselves? Maybe the same thing. We don't navigate seasons in isolation. We bring our seasons into the organizations we lead. What we can't let go of personally often shows up as what the organization can't let go of either. The overlap isn't just personal. It shows up where we do. So here's what I keep coming back to. The overlap isn't a problem to solve. It isn't a sign that something has gone wrong or that we've fallen behind some invisible schedule. It may be the most active season or formation a leader moves through. The tension, the backward pull, and the forward pull is doing something. It's surfacing what previous seasons never had the right conditions to surface. It's asking questions that faster seasons never had time to ask. Our instincts as leaders is to accelerate through it, to find the framework that creates movement, and to get back to the version of ourselves that knows how to produce results in a clear season. And maybe that instinct is worth examining. Because what if the overlap isn't asking us to move faster? What if it's asking us to pay attention to what we're carrying and whether it belongs where we're going? The overlap isn't an obstacle to progress. It may be the place where clarity is being crafted. If you've ever gone to a whiskey tasting, you know it's not a rush. You sit with it. You notice what surfaces and you come back to it. That's what I want to leave you with today. 3 observations, not things to do, just things worth carrying. First, stuck may be the right word, but the reason matters. If what you're feeling is 2 seasons pulling at the same time with equal force, that's not a movement problem. It's an overlap. And an overlap asks something different than a framework for getting moving again. Second, the previous season gave you real things. Wisdom, experience, perspective, confidence. The question isn't whether those things are valuable, because they are. The question is whether you're carrying anything else along with them. The overlap is where that question finally has room to be asked honestly. And third, and I'll leave this one without any explanation, movement alone does not guarantee transition. If you want to sit with these tasting notes, I invite you to the still our web app, where you can find reflection questions on this and all other conversations on the podcast, as well as search the right conversation based on what you're carrying. It's free to use, and you can find the still at craftedclarity.net. If you've ever wanted two completely opposite things at the same time, then you know how this overlap, the lack of movement, feels. The experience, that disorienting, pulled in both directions experience, isn't a sign that you need to get unstuck. It's the overlap. And it's asking you to distill this moment between the seasons and to notice what's revealing. What belongs in the next season and what doesn't. Stay in it. Pay attention. And let the process reveal what belongs. And remember, clarity isn't found. It's crafted. Thanks for listening to Crafted Clarity. If you're a leader wrestling with the tension between success and significance, or if you're trying to align your work with a deeper calling, I'd love to connect with you. If your organization is facing questions about strategy, whether it's alignment, ROI, or building confidence in your team, this is the work we do every day at iBrand. And if you walk this journey yourself, or maybe you're right in the middle of it, I'd love to hear your story and maybe even share it here on the podcast. You can find me at craftedclarity.net.